Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Pi World 2019. Thank you, Norton, for that very nice introduction there. My name is Gregg LeBlanc. Like you said, I am the Vice President of Product here at OSIsoft. It's great to see all of you here. We've done a lot of work, and we'd like to share it with you. And one change that you'll see right up front at Pi World 2019 is we've moved a lot of the product content into day one. So that means that you can get your highlights and product overview right after these morning sessions, and then plan your day accordingly, because the Expo has a lot of great content, and day 3 has deeper dives and best practices for you. So we encourage you to plan your day accordingly and really invest yourself in learning about what's new with the products. And we've been really busy. So you heard Pat talk about how much data there is outside the control network and how it's going to influence how we design systems and so forth. And that's really important. Saving everything. That's a really nice theme to think about. And Bri talked about that evolution and revolution of data and how critical operations really are fueled around the asset and the plant. And I'd like to talk about the investments we've made in the products, because they reflect the journey that we're going on. And at Pi World 2019, you'll see these investments really pay off. So a guiding principle of OSIsoft is that we believe we have ingenious users, and when we give those users the data they need in context, they can transform our world. Now, that's why we built the Pi system. Like Pat said, we are serving a need. We are gathered here to talk about how these ingenious users come together, and our developers have built things to help make that job easier, because we know transforming your world is really time-consuming. And we've been developing ways to help you. So Bri just said that your data is really centered around those critical operations in the asset and in the plant. And that's where your experts are. That's where a lot of your data is. But we know there's more data out there. So we've been investing in the product world to actually connect to more sensors, more types of devices, and then extend that information that we collect there into your Pi system, get it into stakeholders, maybe in your business, in the enterprise, using, say, the Pi integrators. And that's why we've been delivering OSIsoft Cloud Services as a secure way to share your data at scale. So we'll talk about all these things this morning here. And when you look at all that, it's what you should expect from OSIsoft. We're a data infrastructure. We're a system of record. And we give you the tools to unlock that operations potential and that ingenuity of your users to transform our world and make it a better place. Now, last year, we talked about kind of 3 things that we would go home and do. Add more dimension, scale, and scope to your operations by lighting up more of that dark data. And during the past year, OSIsoft has been doing this as well. So we've been actually using our own operations to go and instrument more use cases in our facility. We'll talk about that a little bit. And really follow the 3 roadmap principles that you'll see throughout the conference. So concentrating on manageable systems, making software that's easier to manage and deploy predictably, working on that seamless infrastructure. That's really what we're talking about. We're in a transition between this the critical operations network, expanding the reach out into more types of devices, expanding it to more users, and then that increases the scope and value of your data. That's kind of what Pat said earlier, is that the more data you add and the more reach you get, the more return you get on that investment. So when we think about that big critical operation, like that utility we talked about last year, they have a lot going on. It's an interconnected network of things. And, oh, look, there's our office building, actually. We are a participant in this grid. And that's not just any building. That's this really highly instrumented SLTC, the San Leandro Technology Center, or campus, I believe. And we want to be not just a passive citizen on this grid. We want to actually be a participant. We want to have solar panels that generate electricity. We want to be a smart grid citizen. So we're continuously deploying new sensors, recording new pieces of information to make the building work at peak performance, because we're part of a Gold LEED certified campus. And we were the first building in this, and we built a second building. And we wanted to capture what we've learned by operating the first building and apply it to the second building as tenants start coming online. Drawing may not reflect what's going on there, so if you come to one of those executive briefing centers, you'll notice that maybe the buildings are not turned that direction. But that's what happens during a rollout. So we begin our story around manageable systems, and that means listening to customers large and small and learning from their practices about deployment and how they actually upgrade and patch systems. Because we know that most of you, I think, are not in the IT business. So you have a critical operation to run. So we need to be able to get your software to you and make it patchable and manageable. And those critical operations, I'm happy to report, actually rely on a Pi system. And it all starts with that data flow. We talked about getting that data from that critical operations network. So that's the connectors, that's the interfaces, that's maybe some data you're writing in another means. And then we give you the capabilities to store and manage and add context and then deliver that data to those that need it. I'm going to need a little more room to tell this story here because over the years, the system has grown to be quite large. It's got a lot of moving pieces. And you're here at Pi World because the core of that Pi system, the Pi server, is the base of your critical operations. And we want that Pi server to remain secure and up to date. But that can be a lot of work. And that's what we've learned from you. So we've invested in making our software easily deployable. So we've given you some scripts to help deploy a testing environment, say infrastructure as a service provider. So that's Azure, that's Amazon Web Services. And we've created a set of tools to help you test and then validate that when we release a patch, it actually doesn't change the features of the system. And you can then confidently go adopt those patches to your core Pi system. So this is some of the work that we've been working on in the past year. So in order to dive a little deeper into this, I'd like to invite Chris Nelson to the stage. He is our Vice President of Software Development, and I think he can hardly contain his excitement to tell you what we've been up to.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg, and welcome to Pi World 2019 San Francisco. I want to start by thanking all of you in the audience that have come to visit us at our headquarters at SLTC, San Leandro Tech Campus. You're going to be hearing a lot about that throughout the week. And an open invite to the rest of you. Please come by and see how we're utilizing the Pi system to optimize our building automation system and really reduce our energy footprint to be a good Earth steward. We started this process very much like you. We deployed a production Pi server onto our production IT network into our data center. We deployed a connector interface against our building automation system to collect that data and really unlock that data to our data heroes to really optimize our energy footprint. And instead of going through slides, I thought I'd just give you a look at what that system looks like. If you can switch to the tablet, please. Here is a look using Pi Vision of our overall building automation system. On the right-hand side, you'll see that Explorer. And throughout the week, we'll be showing you how we're using the Pi system to optimize our building and really reduce that footprint throughout the Product Expo and our product presentations. I want to bring your attention to the middle, that building KPI. This allows us to get a quick insight into our energy usage of the current month compared to a year ago. And you can see we're doing pretty good. You can't read that, but we're doing about 16% better than a year ago. And I'm going to go ahead and double-click into that more detail. For context, our old building was half the size, and we used 26 kilowatts a square foot in that old building. The design space of our new building is 8.5 kilowatts a square foot. And as we deployed, or as we started operating the building, we were above that design target pretty significantly. And we like to believe that by us deploying the Pi system, unlocking that data to our colleagues, our partners, and our vendors, we're able to bring that energy usage down more in line with the design target. And you could see what we did last year in that pink column, and you could see that we're even coming below that this year. Back to the slides, please. So this really allowed us to change our mindset and get a firsthand experience of operating the Pi system. And we took that firsthand experience and merged it with a lot of the feedback, and it's really changing our release cadence and getting to the point where we can always ensure that we can give you patches so that you're always running the most stable, reliable, and secure version of the Pi server. And it's really changed our mindset, and I like to say we have adopted a modern DevOps mindset. What does that mean? when we first started this, we were very much like I believe your experience is. We manually were provisioning VMs within our data center or in public cloud, Azure or AWS. We were manually installing our software, whether or not that be an upgrade or a new system. We were then manually doing backups and restoring them into those new provisioned assets. And then we were basically running manual tests, hoping that our system would behave as it was before the upgrade. But now, this change of mindset, we've created automatic scripts to deploy and provision those resources in our data center and in Azure and AWS. We now use PowerScript shells to automate the installation of our software, the upgrade or a particular patch. We use PowerShell scripts to automatically take a backup and restore it, and then automated tests on that particular infrastructure and raise our confidence that we know as we deploy our software, we will not be affecting those critical operations that Pat and Bry talked about. And as we learn this, we will be giving this back to you, and there's lots of things throughout the week where we will be showing you these deployment scripts and these tests. So as of today, we are launching PyServer 2018 SP2. And the main message here is it's the most stable, reliable, secure version of the PyServer, and we highly recommend all of you upgrade to it or make plans to upgrade to it. The PyServer 2018 major version we will be supporting for many years in the field, and we will be releasing critical operational fixes and security vulnerabilities to that particular version. And as we do that, we will be basically giving you exactly what's in those patches and our testing guidance, and actually be providing you tests that you can run on your particular environments, again, to reduce the cost and make sure that you're always running the most stable, reliable PyServer for your critical operations. Another major product enhancement that we're going to be talking about this week is PyVision 2019. You have maybe heard in the past talk about PyVision 4. PyVision 4 was a mix of feature enhancements and a major technology overhaul. But that major technology overhaul required some server-side enhancements, and it was delaying us getting the features to you. And we really wanted to get those features to you. So we moved those features into PyVision 2019, with the two major ones being a utility to move all your process book displays into PyVision, and also we heard loud and clear that you needed a better ad hoc trending experience so that you could trend data items across many different displays and really get the root cause analysis. If you go back to the tablet, I just want to show you that in action. So here is PyVision 2019. We upgraded one of our servers in our production environment. And again, you can see very much the same overview screen. One of the major systems in our headquarters is our HVAC system, and you see that on the bottom left-hand corner, how many alarms that we are currently having right now. That's VAV, variable air volume units. I spent a lot of time on the 4th floor, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. This schematic started as a process book to screen that we use that utility to convert it directly into PyVision, and then we're able to utilize a lot of the PyVision features. One of them is that drill-in navigation. I'm going to go ahead and click on that CO404. That's where I spend a lot of time at my desk. And you can see what is going on with that subsystem. I'm going to go ahead and put a cursor on that right-hand side, and you can see on the top-hand right, there's a new symbol. If I go ahead and click on that, it's going to launch an ad hoc workspace, which gives me those particular variables. I'm going to go ahead and close that and get out of full screen mode and just go back to the schematic using the browser. And then I'm going to go into the conference room that I spend a lot of time in and look at, whoop, not the ad hoc. I want to go ahead and look at its subsystem and look at the room temperature there. And I could go ahead and add that room temperature onto my particular ad hoc workspace. And that's where I can start adding data items across many different displays and I can also search for data items and add them onto this. And again, you get the normal pan and zoom and the actual tracers on the particular workspace. So we're going to be showing this throughout the week. Please go to the Pi Vision talk later on today. And then on day 3, we'll showing you exactly how to use this new ad hoc workspace. Back to the slides, please. So we have a lot of Pi system enhancements for you this week. I'm not going to get into the ones I just talked about. Another major one is we are opening up a lot of our major interfaces to add health messaging support so that you can quickly see the data flow and how your data flow is happening within those interface health messages. They will be using a new OMF ingress endpoint within the Pi Web API, very much like Pat talked about, where you can start to ingest lots of different types of data into the Pi system through that OMF ingress. We have lots of updates to the integrator product line. And for those of you that don't know, we have a streaming edition that allows you to move data as it comes into the Pi system to the destination of the integrator. And we have broad support for Amazon Web Services. Very much like Gregg said, we are also, as we learn how to provision these resources within our data center and public clouds like Azure and Amazon, we are going to be releasing those scripts so that you can use them as well to quickly provision Pi systems in your environments, as well as providing those data flow and functional tests to you as we release those patches. Lots of talks this week about it. Please go to the Product Expo, learn a lot about it. I wanted to highlight 2. There's a tech talk on day 2 talking about these infrastructure deployment scripts. And on day 3, we have a lab. And on day 3, please go to the product talk where you could get the detailed information about Pi Server 2018 R2. With that, I'll pass it back to Gregg.
All right. Thank you, Chris. So, as you can see, the SLTC has a lot of operational data, but like Bri was saying earlier, we wouldn't consider our operations critical necessarily. We do have a lot of people who might be critical of how the operation runs, but it turns out in order to resolve some of those feedback items, we had to deploy more data. We had to get more data from more places in order to do that. And that really hits on our seamless infrastructure roadmap theme here. So we needed to deploy more devices, get more data out there, new shapes of data that maybe we didn't know we had to ingest before, and then deliver it to the people that needed to take action on it, on that feedback. So at the SLTC, one thing we use is Pi Cloud Connect. We use it quite a bit because we really don't want people directly accessing that critical operations Pi server on our IT network. We want it to be kind of shift that load elsewhere. And in 2018, we upgraded Pi Cloud Connect to accept a different kind of identity provider. Sign up is super smooth, and users experience 0 downtime. So that means that you're able to actually, just with a few clicks, deploy Pi Cloud Connect and share some of that data to another Pi system seamlessly. It's a really great tool, and we use it a lot. But that's not all. So I'm going to make a little more room here, because that instrumentation where we're doing that seamless infrastructure work, it required new kinds of sensors, new kinds of devices, and we weren't going to make connectors and interfaces to all those different devices because there isn't a lot in common, and we might change up how we're doing that experiment. So we enhanced our Pi Web API to ingest the OMF, the OSIsoft message format, so that a device could actually speak OMF to the endpoint, and it would get ingested and processed in the Pi system just like any other kind of data. So we didn't have to concentrate on building specialized software for all those devices, and that means that they landed all in one Pi system. That means that we could create one vision display in order to look at all that data in context with the sensor network data. And we then could use the integrator to then build Power BI reports or other things that help us keep track of what the building's actually doing. Or we could even use Pi Cloud Connect and then build all those applications and reports out on these Pi Cloud connected servers so we could take the data-hungry use cases and shift them over to these other resources rather than working right against the operations Pi system. That should hopefully sound familiar. So we're trying to follow those practices that we've learned from you. But we also had some devices that need to speak directly to the cloud. So they couldn't, they were deployed in such a way that they needed an IoT platform or something like that. So we use the OMF message format, the OSIsoft message format, to actually emit that data and ingest it directly into OSIsoft cloud services. Or we had to maybe create a little bit of scripting in the IoT platform where the data was landing, ingest it as OMF into the cloud services, and then we can see that data in context. And finally, we connected our operations Pi system directly to OSIsoft cloud services using the creatively named Pi to OCS type of software agent. I don't really know how we're going to call that, but it's a way to connect. We've connected over 20,000 points directly into OCS from that operations Pi system. And now we can actually securely share that to other platforms, to vendors, to partners, and so forth. So what started out as a pretty typical IT deployment for an OT deployment for our Pi system, where we have a controls network, we've got our IT network. We were ingesting some data from our utility company, and we were also cloud connecting some of that data out so that we could actually share it for application purposes, transformed. And so we had to use our pervasive data collection work that we've been working on. So it's Pi connectors, of course, Pi interfaces. We used those off the shelf in the building, but then we also used Edge Data Store. So we ingested some of that OMF data into a set of tooling that persists the data locally on a smaller device and then puts it further up the chain, either to a Pi system or to OCS. Or we used open source tooling. So Dynamic Systems has built a thing called Fog Lamps. It's an open source repo that actually you can install on devices, and it emits OMF, and then it can be caught and processed in a Pi server or OCS. And then there are sensors that are so tiny they can't actually run a lot of software on them. And they just speak OMF natively. So they may be battery operated, they may have a low power or low size footprint, and they emit OMF directly, either to their IoT platform, OCS, or the Pi system on that endpoint that we've upgraded. So now our deployment looks different. So we actually had to go and deploy a new wireless IT network that could be dedicated to these devices. We didn't want them on the corporate IT network, and we didn't want them on the control network, so we provisioned a new one. So now this is kind of the way we've decided to deliver the data, and I'm sure there are ways that you would adapt this as well. But the end goal is to share all that data into a singular location so we get a uniform perspective on how the San Leandro Tech Center is operating. And so then we shared all that to OCS. So let's review our first use cases. Now, we talked about our building being super smart, and it has these auto-tinting windows. And the windows actually, they change the shade as the sun moves around the building, or if you're in a conference room, you can actually poke a button, and it will lower the transmissivity so that you can actually not be blinded by the sun. Now, the control system tells us how those things are working. The users might tell you a different story because they're in the room and maybe the window isn't working. So we actually had to deploy little IoT devices in there to measure the amount of light coming in, and then we built a little bit of sensing code with the fog lamp deployment from Dynamic Systems. We're ingesting that into the Pi system, and that allows us to increase the amount of good luck in the building because the alternative was to deploy an umbrella, and that increased our bad luck to block the sun. So we wanted to kind of change that narrative around, so we actually had a nice story for our people trying to be in conference rooms or in there and just doing their work and not being blinded by the sun. Now, conference room occupancy monitoring is another use case where sometimes the set point on the thermostat wasn't being reached properly. So you get enough equipment, you get enough people in a room, and it heats up, and the HVAC system costs go up because it keeps trying to change the temperature to that set point. So we use some IoT devices to detect occupancy and measure the temperature. And what we've proven with these IoT devices is that hot air increases the temperature in meetings. So anyway, to clear some of the hot air that's up here, I'd like to invite Chris back to the stage to talk about these use cases in more detail.
It's great, always talking about the hot air. So this looks, so these are the devices that we created. We basically did a lot of shopping on Amazon, bought some Raspberry Pi 3s, that chassis and the sensors, and we built this, and we built probably about 20 of them so that we could deploy them around the building whenever we needed to. And these sensors are about anywhere from $180 to $200 it costs us to build these. So if you back to the tablet, please. So here is our SLT system again. And Gregg talked about this auto tinting glass, view glass. Well, just getting that system to behave as we expected was quite an interesting feat, is what I'll tell you. So on this left-hand side, we have this view glass health status. I'm going to go ahead and use the drill-in navigation to look at the building and the current status of the tint. So this is a schematic that we use to really understand if everything is working in concert together, because there's a controller in each one of those buildings. On the right-hand side here, we added this new one, IoT light level monitoring, and this gives us much more insight into what is happening in the building. Now, I just want to explain here that we were able to deploy these devices, get that data into our production Pi server, and then start to use the capabilities of the Pi server on that IoT data. So we created asset templates in our AF product. So as we deploy these devices, we know the locational context of where they are in our building. And we also have metadata rules within them. So in this particular case, we can deploy one of these devices and say, OK, if we detect a light of above this limit, go ahead and trigger an event frame. So we define some rules in our asset analytics product to go ahead and create event frames when we see a condition that is causing us to have a high light condition inside the building. Once we create that event frame, then we could go back and use that time frame to tune the control algorithm within the view glass so that we can take care of the particular situation or scenario that is causing that high light condition. By creating that event frame, then we can send notifications to our building management staff so they know in a certain part of the building that we're having a high light limit. We can actually take the next step and go proactive and say, listen, Mr. Employee or Mr. and Mrs. Employee, you could either be an unlucky employee and open that umbrella, or you could just go work in a conference room for a couple hours until we get that high light limit resolved. So that's one use case where we're actually bringing that data into our production Pi server, leveraging the capabilities of Pi to give us greater insight in concert with the data that we're getting from our building management system. Next, Gregg talked about this conference room. And basically what we have is we have big conference rooms and we have these little huddle rooms that are really meant for 1, 2, or 3 people. But what we saw is that we had about 5 or 6 people going into those conference rooms with their laptops and utilizing the TV on the wall and then trying to cool that room to a comfortable temperature. And that's where we got in this race condition where we were never able to actually cool to the actual set point, and we were just wasting energy. So we created a display here, this conference room monitoring with IoT. And you can see that we're monitoring Estabrook as one of our larger conference rooms. And you can see by utilizing some of the acoustic sensors on that IoT device, we could see if anybody is actually in the room and whether or not that's corresponding with the light on or not. In the middle column there, we're actually measuring what the building automation system thinks the temperature is, what the set point is, and this is where we're using that fog lamp sensor to get us more granular information so that we could see what is the actual temperature in the room, not coming from the building automation system. I'd like to check one of the conference rooms that me and Gregg are very familiar with. Our friend Norton invites us in there all the time to do presentations, and you're lucky. I was hoping that the light was off because I don't think we have an executive briefing today, and I was going to give Norton a hard time if the light was still on.
Oh, Chris, I just thought of a critical operation that we have.
Yeah?
Can I share it with you guys?
Sure.
Yeah. Let's go back to the slides for a second. Now, remember, last year we talked about dark data, and you just see how we're lighting up some of that dark data right now. And some of our most critical data is actually coming from an operation that's fairly poorly instrumented and definitely not on our control network. Now, I'm talking really about dark roast data. So we have these wonderful coffee machines at the office. And you heard Pat talk about the criticality of these slurry pumps that are out in the field. And they only have a few different measurements on it. And our slurry pumps are these espresso machines. They're super fancy, they're super nice and delicious. but sometimes they make funny noises. And when the machine makes funny noises, you know that it's about to go out of whack, and then we're going to reduce our critical operations, because what we want to do is increase employee uptime by reducing machine downtime. So we can't bring the SLTC to you to see this in action, but we did instrument another machine that's not a slurry pump or an espresso machine, but it's called the penny press, and we've taken much of the same technology we put on that espresso machine, and we put it on this penny press. So please go down and see it at the Yosemite Ballroom, or Yosemite Expo Center. It's a lot of fun, and you get to take a little bit of Pi World home with you. So this naturally leads us to our final waypoint this morning, which is the increased scope and value of your data. And scope means that variety of sources. We've talked about new sources of data, and then delivering it to maybe a wider variety of users. Maybe there's some users that haven't seen any data before, and it's just truly magical to get that data into their hands off a poorly instrumented, say, remote operation or something. That is increasing the scope and impact of your data. So when we talk about that, we really talk about lighting up remote operations data. Maybe we're talking about getting more data into OCS so you can actually work with partners more easily. Because the advantage here is that when you share your data and you direct who securely gets access to that data, you can then write one version of your partner application or analytic or whatever it is that you need to do with that critical operations data. So that allows partners to write one version of the application and apply it to many different systems out there because they've shared it onto a common platform. And the data is yours to control because that's important to you and it's important to us that you feel like you are sharing the data with those who need it without going and creating an account on your own IT network. So this is a way to share your data at scale. So let's talk about what's inside OCS just a little bit. We're going to talk about the things that we've already seen already, which is like that OMF ingress. We talked about that. We talked about identity providers. So if you want to use Azure Active Directory, or you want to use Google Identity Provider, or you want to just use a Microsoft account, those are ways that you can actually provision an account and then federate it with your own IT practices and make that easy to work with. We also have a great set of RESTful APIs, and the APIs help an application builder or maybe a data scientist work with that data and actually gain some more insight out of it, because you can put several quantities of Pi system data into OCS natively. And finally, we've also been talking about that way of delivering Pi data natively from a Pi server all the way up to OCS. And so that Pi to OCS component, you can go put your hands on and talk with our people at the Expo, or see it live right now, which we're going to do with Chris. So Chris?
Thanks, Greg. Really excited after the past couple keynotes talking about OSIsoft Cloud Services to be able to show you a live demo on the stage today. I want to set the stage for the actual demo. Like Greg said, we have a wonderful information coming into our production Pi servers, but they are on our production IT networks, and we do not let contractors and vendors onto those networks to get access to the data. And previously, we were using Pi Cloud Connect to move that to a Pi server for some of our partners, but now we can give them direct access to the data through our tenant in OSIsoft Cloud Services. So before the show, we actually created a tenant in OSIsoft Cloud Services that roughly relates to a company, and that's what we're going to show you. So if you go ahead and switch to this tablet again. So here is just the splash screen. We will be giving you a live blog of all the updates as we push them out to OSIsoft Cloud Services. I want to bring your attention over here to namespaces. Namespaces are a way to partition within a tenant. And they roughly relate to either environments or geographies. Here I'm showing you environments. Within the OSIsoft events tenant, this is what we're going to be showing you throughout the week. We have literally a development namespace, staging namespace, and a production namespace. And I'm going to be primarily showing you the staging namespace there. As Greg mentioned, before the conference, we've deployed a new component that we call Pi to OCS Agent. It is the piece of software that connects to your production Pi servers and moves data up into cloud services. We've deployed 2 of them. Let's take a look at our Philadelphia one, which is moving data from our production Pi server in Philadelphia up into OSIsoft Cloud Services. On the right-hand side, you can see the last communication, which is now. And you can see that we are moving over 18,000 tags in real time up into OSIsoft Cloud Services. And we've backfilled using the Pi to OC agent back into January 1st, 2018, so that we have a rich set of data up into OSIsoft Cloud Services. Real quickly, we'll show you the Pi to OCS agent that was deployed onto our SLTC environment. And that is sending over 19,000 tags in real time up into OSIsoft Cloud Services. Now again, back to the story here where we want to invite our vendors and our partners to get access to this data so that we don't have to give them access to our production servers. So I'm going to go over to users and roles, and this will give me a look at all the users that are on my system. The one I want to bring your attention to is this second, Alberto Colombo, who is using Google as his identity provider. And that's okay with us. That's fine. We can handle that. We invited Alberto into our tenant so that we can share our data with him and he can leverage that. And I'll be talking about Alberto's story here in a second. I can also see what access Alberto has. OSIsoft Cloud Services is a role-based authorization system. So we invited Alberto into it, and we created a role called equipment vendor, where we will put all of our partners in which we want to share data with. And if I quickly go over to our Sequential Data Store Explorer, here is a list of all the streams that are in my system. I just want to quickly go and see if Alberto has access to this particular stream, and he doesn't. So this shows you how you can use the role-based authorization system to provide access to your vendors and to your partners, and you as the customer control that. So if you go back to the slides for a second, let's talk about Alberto and DERNetSoft. Alberto is the president and founder of DERNetSoft, who engages behind-the-meter customers and provides them with services such as energy awareness, compliance reporting, building technology, and advanced analytics to transform from energy consumers to energy prosumers via DER's technology adoption. DERNetSoft brings that energy dark data to the light, to the building owner first, and then aggregates that at the community level. The key point here is that DERNetSoft is using OSIsoft Cloud Services as its data infrastructure for these services. Next slide, please. This is an example of a display from DERNetSoft, which is showing that community-level aggregation. And they're providing this service back to transmission and distribution operators so that they can understand what the load is in a particular community area. And they're also providing services to larger enterprises like Kaiser Permanente and OSIsoft so that we can compare energy uses across different environments. Alberto will be talking about what DERNetSoft is doing on Wednesday at 11:45 to 12:30 p.m. at the Park 55. The session is titled Data Analytics to Enhance Advanced Energy Communities Planning and Operation. And I highly recommend you go see this talk and learn about some of the solutions that are coming on the market for the DER problem space. Next slide. Yeah. Thank you. As Gregg mentioned, there's a lot of changes this year. Later on this afternoon, we have product talks across our major product lines, and you can see that on the left-hand side. But the main takeaways are our releases and announcements. Available today, Pi Server 2018 SP2 has been released. Pi Integrator 2018 R2 with streaming data support and broad support for Amazon Web Services. And again, we are always releasing connectors and interfaces. The list is too long. The other things you'll be hearing about throughout this week, too, are OSIsoft Cloud Services and our partner platform as a service, is what I was just showing you there. Pi Vision 2019, and please check out the Pi Web API OMF Ingress. And with that, I thank you. Look forward to talking to you throughout the week. And thank you for attending Pi World.
Well, wait, Chris. I mean,
what?
That was all cool and everything, but
Okay.
I think we got one more thing we could share.
I think we got plenty of time.
We got plenty of time, 23 seconds. All right. By now, you know that OSIsoft has been around for a long time. Norton pointed that out when Pat's talked about our legacy of commitment to critical operations. I mean, when you look at this slide, you see that most of our customers are still with us for the long term. We have 21,000 sites. And a number caught my eye. It's this one down here, 2 billion data streams. So we think, across all the Pi systems deployed across the world, we are tracking 2 billion data streams. That's a lot of data. And I was thinking about that in terms of what the DER NetSoft problem space is, that interconnected utility, that grid of things, and how many data points there would be in something like that. Because so let's say each house has 10 measurement points on it, maybe 20, because they have a smart meter. But that doesn't even count all the critical operations data, the facilities, and those kind of things, but just the number of houses alone. And you look at what Alberto is doing with DER NetSoft. San Leandro must have tens of thousands of homes, right? And that's times 20, I don't know. I was told there'd be no math. But anyway, if you start zooming out to kind of the grid level, like this is a picture of the transmission grid in the lower 48 states. And Chris, do you have any idea of how many homes there are, just private homes that would have a smart meter on them?
How about 125,000 million?
That's a really good guess. It's like he looked at the slides beforehand. Yeah, so there's estimated 125 million homes out there, and maybe most of them have smart meters, and maybe that's 10 or 20 data points per smart meter. You start getting into that neighborhood of, say, 2 billion streams, because that's a lot of data. And so I thought, well, what if we could sign up and scale out? Like, what if we really looked at OCS and turned our scalability up to 11? Because it could go further, I guess, but 11 was a good number. And I thought, how do we securely share that data at scale? So I challenged Chris, and I said, Chris, I really need a deployment that's big, like super big. Like, what if we could track all the Pi system data in the world in one location to make it easy to access and share securely? And that means that big or small, your Pi system has the resources it needs. And so they did. They went and they created a deployment for me, for us, really. And it's got about 100 million meters with 20 properties each. And there's billions and trillions of events. And so the ingestion rate has been something like 12 billion events per hour, something like that. It translates into a pretty impressive number. And we filled it up because we wanted to see just how big we could take this. Because like Pat said earlier, save everything. And a friend of mine's grandmother once told me, you can't have everything. Where would you put it? Well, it turns out we made something that's big enough to hold everything. And we invite you to put your data into OCS. Thank you very much.